everyone, and this is the last session of what's been a powerhouse morning, and I want to welcome everybody. We have a virtual audience for this particular panel, so it was so important that we've had people coming in from around the country wanting to. There we go. Popping this.
Drop the mic.
Oh, we okay?
Yeah, we're still alive.
Yeah, we're good out there. All right. I want to make sure we're good in television land because all the people have been wanting to see this panel, and so they've asked us to live stream this across America, and that's what we're going to do this morning. So on behalf of the commissioners, the members of our councils of distinguished scientists and educators, partners, funding collaboratives, and all the colleagues who couldn't join us, they're going to be watching as well, and there are many of us who are here. We want to apologize. We're a little bit late in kicking this off because the panels have been so strong and the questions so numerous. But we've been in Tacoma the past 2 days. We are delighted at the great welcome we've received from the Tacoma public school system. Our hosts have been fantastic. They've been teaching us about their efforts to integrate social, emotional, and academic development, both in and out of the school system. We've had an opportunity to visit 2 schools and see for ourselves some of the innovative educational opportunities that are existing here, seeing young people that are engaged in learning. They're being challenged, they're developing and growing as people and certainly as citizens and future leaders of the Tacoma area. We want to especially single out the superintendent, Carla Santorno, and her deputy superintendent, a person who has done a lot of work already and who will do much more in the future. Josh Garcia has been asked to do a lot, and he's volunteered to step up and do even more as we go forward. So we're thrilled that he's going to do that, and we are also delighted that he and Carla introduced us to so many of their very talented team here in Tacoma. Over the course of the meeting, the discussions have explored the roles of adults, of institutions and systems within the community, and now what we're going to do is turn our attention to policy. We've got a terrific panel. This session is titled, How States Support and Strengthen Local Leadership. And this panel of experts will discuss how state policy can create conditions for local innovation, like we've witnessed here in Tacoma, and how this can be part of the change management that will come along as this report gets concluded in 2018 as a report from the nation talking about how we can really improve academic performance by inclusion of social and emotional learning. Our moderator is terrific. She is a marathoner, having recently completed the New York Marathon. Delighted. Came here in some pain because of that exertion. Was doing midnight yoga to try to get some of that stress out, and is clearly mentally as sharp as they come. She's a member of our Council of Distinguished Educators in addition to being a commissioner. And so Dr. Maria Karstaffen is really impressive. She's got an impressive record in the field, having been in Washington, D.C. and Austin, Texas, currently superintendent of Atlanta Public Schools, where improvements are happening every month, every week, every day, literally. She's seeing impressive student performance gains as a result of how that team that she's built is working together. She credits her success with her strategy of broadening the perspective of leaders, educators, parents, the community at large, educating the whole child, providing the local infrastructure and the supports to get that done. And so we are delighted she's going to lead this panel. She'll do so with great skill, and she will extricate from these 3 panelists some of the most important innovative ideas that we can have in America that will help transform American public education. So it's one of the reasons we're also broadcasting this, so we can have a video record of this innovation that will be there as a testimony of the work of Maria and her panel. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Governor. We really appreciate it. Today's panel, as outlined by the Governor, is going to be that policy should support locally driven innovation. Can you all hear that? Oh. the truth is out there, right? And most educators kind of have a lot of conspiracy theories about the state and how it actually works, and is it really working for us? And so we started we're going to start in a place that allows you to help us challenge that theory and uncover, if you will, some of the conspiracies, clear out some of the perspectives, and share with us the structures that you've been doing. All of you have been doing great work, and we're going to talk about it in a moment. But I asked them in advance to describe, as I introduce themselves to me, from their elementary-minded psychosocial self. And so we'll start here, and you'll give your name, but then and your descriptor, okay? You've all been thinking about it. Your name, and I will finish the bio for you. So introduce your name, and I'll start right here.
Hello, my name is Mona Johnson. I'm the Director of Student Support at the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. Maria told me one word for each letter, and I could not do that, so I'm going to admit that right off the bat, that I was rebellious. And my words were mistake, avoidance, and just surviving. So
she's Mona Mistake Avoidance, Just Surviving Johnson, right? Director of Student Support, State of Washington, Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction.
Steve Canavero. Is this where you fill in, Agent Mulder, or do I keep going?
No, you just do your descriptor.
Oh, Steve Canavero, State Superintendent, Nevada Department of Education. And for the S, I said sheltered, and for the C, I said caffeinated. And not necessarily because I drank a lot of coffee as my psychosocial self
in elementary school.
But I had essentially 2 speeds, fast and faster.
Right, and he's also appointed by the governor, took his role in 2016, and oversees about 470,000 students. All right, Jim, you're going to bring it home.
Jim Porter. He was jumbled. It's on. It's working.
Yep.
I'll use my school teacher voice. And I was a problematic child, a bad student, actually. And so there's a long story involved in that, but we're here to talk about policy, not me. So I'm going to go take it.
So he said to me, I'm Jim Problematic Learner Porter. But he is the chair of the Kansas State Board of Education, and is also an educator, a lifelong educator, 47 years, if I remember correctly, a teacher, a principal, and you got the distinct joy of being a superintendent. So I am so glad to have your leadership, all of you, here today. All right, so we're going to jump into it because I know we're pressed for time. Fair warning, because I know everyone's trying to catch flights. If you go over time, there will be a penalty. The next question you will either have to do as an interpretive dance, charades, or a rap battle with the moderator. All right, so you got to kind of get to it. And also, in the spirit of social emotional learning, I made sticks with your names on it, so I'm going to just pull it. I'll give a fun fact about who you are as we continue to talk about the bio. Yep, and I just want to say I am a troll on social media. I go into everything that people put out there. Steve had a very fun year in 2011 on Instagram. So just... and I know everybody's going to be Googling that while we're supposed to be listening to the panel. But in the meantime, I would like for each of you to talk about the steps that you've taken from a state level around the integration of social, emotional, and academic development in our schools. You've all started this work. You have a lot of experience, and we really want to hear how you included innovations in how you were looking to form what you did. So we'll start with Steve. Steve is also an Aspen Education Fellow and is in the Aspen Global Network.
Thank you. We've been working for some time around changing the outcomes for kids in Nevada and recognizing as well that social emotional development, the academic development of our students is a core responsibility, as is math, language arts, science, STEM, etc. So part of the work in the last few years has been to elevate SEED as a component, if you will, equal to academic interventions from the state's perspective and from my perspective, both as a father and as the state superintendent, to ensure that SEED is a component of our theory of action across our state. And given the engagements that you talked about, and my propensity for fast and faster, I learned a lot, actually, being a part of the Aspen Network and listening to conversations that you heard prior to this from Colin and others. And we have at times pumped the brakes, recognizing that the state doesn't have all the answers. Our districts are leaders and innovators. Washoe County School District, under the direction of Superintendent Davis, a Castle District, we have a lot to learn from them in how we can roll out and how we can support the innovation and development of social, emotional, academic development of our students in our schools, more so than sort of a prescriptive top-down. So a bit of a balancing act for us, but making investments in social workers, providing access to social workers in all of our schools, but also at the same time recognizing that FAST isn't always perfect, and that we need to learn a lot from our districts in this sort of next step around coherence.
Okay. Mona. Mona is also recognized as the champion for children from the National Association of Children of Alcoholics, and also received a recent award from the Anti-Drug Coalition. Congratulations on both.
Thank you. Our journey in Washington State has been at least a decade long, and I really would say that it was driven by local efforts, grassroots efforts, and districts like Tacoma, Bellevue, Sumner. There's many districts in our state that have been doing this work at the local level. And it's now us as a state finally jumping on board to realize we should probably look at a systematic way to support these efforts, because we know they fit and integrate extremely well with academic success, because kids, as the panel previous spoke, no kid can really learn if they have social, emotional, or physical needs that are unmet. So we've been doing this work for about 10 years. The past 3 years, so there's been some awesome traction in terms of policy work that's really informed our state office to move forward. The first was groundbreaking legislation that was supported by our local state representatives and senators. In fact, one of our champion representatives in the office is in the audience today, Representative Tana Sen. So Tana, I want to shout out to you for thank you to you for helping us. But in 2015, we were given support through a small seed pot of money to convene a statewide diverse group of stakeholders to develop some benchmarks and standards for our state. That was really instrumental. Again, some districts have already been ahead of us in that, and we didn't have that state framework in place. So these stakeholders, who represented a lot of community folks as well as school folks and out-of-school time practitioners, helped us develop that framework in 2015, 2016. That work concluded, and then we were able to get another small sum of money from our state legislature to support us developing an online teacher educator module for social emotional learning. Literally just launched that out of our office in mid-September. We thank our friends at Castle, who've also been the third wheel that's been instrumental policy-wise in helping us move forward in the state, because we were selected to participate in the Collaborating States Initiative and able to talk to other states and glean information from other states around what they've done from a state perspective to work. And then our final piece of policy work that's been successful that we have on our plates as we speak, and is a huge lift, is creating indicators to go with our standards and benchmarks statewide. We just began that work, and not only are we being tasked as a state by our legislature to create those indicators with a very diverse, broad group of stakeholders, but those indicators need to be culturally responsive, developmentally appropriate, strength-based, and trauma-informed. So we're intentionally weaving those fields of information and knowledge and research into the development of the indicators for our state. So we will keep you posted on how that unfolds. It's a really big, heavy lift. We're also going to be creating some best practice guidance. But let me just say, we could have done none of this without the local, state, and regional partnerships that we have with our schools and with our community practitioners. So definitely partnership that's led to our success thus far.
Okay, so Jim, I went all the way to Fredonia to have to find something, because you're not on social media. But I did find a Betamax tape that I won't talk about. But you've been a director of music in your community for 30 years as well, because you're a music teacher and you're still doing that for the community today. So thank you for all that you've done. Tell us a little bit about Kansas. How did you start the work, and what innovations were you looking at to learn from?
Thank you, Diane. I need to point out that I'm an elected official, so what I will do is I will divert and answer whatever I want to. Several things came together at the same time. First of all, it was our time to change our accreditation system. And for years, we had been looking at, we'd been making decisions about school based on a single test on a single day. And we looked, and we'd done really well. We were very proud of ourselves until we looked further. And we saw, yes, our scores had been going up, but our graduation rate had not. Again, our scores had been going up, but our students that were going to go to post-secondary institutions without the need for remediation hadn't changed either. So we identified maybe student performance and student success are two different things. So in that process, we decided we were going to go out to our community and just start from scratch. And so we asked, and we went to 20 places across Kansas. The commissioner and each one of us represent 10% of the state. So we went as board members and had these conversations. What does a successful 24-year-old Kansan look like? What is the role of K-12 education in making that happen? And what is the role in post-secondary education? And make it clear that we're not just talking about four-year institutions when we talk about post-secondary. There's a whole lot of discussion, and we were told this: academic preparation is important, and that's a given. Cognitive preparation is important because not only, it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you can't use that information and if you can't think about that information, if you can't solve problems, you're not going to be successful. You need technical skills. Technical skills, whether you're going to be a welder or a pharmacist, are different. You both need technical skills, but they need to be different, and you need to be prepared for those. And a huge discussion about employability skills. You need to have those skills necessary to be successful in a job. You need to show up on time. You need to be able to pass the drug test. You need to be able to work with others. You need to be able to do critical thinking. You need to be able to do all of those things. We didn't have enough business representation on that group. They had been invited, but we didn't feel like we had enough business representation. So then we went out and met with several chambers of commerce and asked the same question and got the same answer, with one exception. The business people told us, we want people that are in our business to be engaged in their community. So civic engagement became the fifth key. And what are we looking at? When we put that together, it's based on 5 R's. Results, we've always had results. That's your test scores. But there are other things that are equally important. Relationships. We talked about relationships yesterday. A student, I'm not a researcher, but I have made multiple observations that students are more successful when they have an adult that cares about them. Relevance. So many students are sitting in the classroom and not doing well, not because they're enabled, and not because they're not able, because they don't see it as important. So let's make education important to those students. Responsive culture. If you have students, and this is directly related to social emotional learning, if you have students that are not being successful, why are they not being successful? Are they dealing with adverse childhood experiences? Are they dealing with trauma? Are they dealing with many other things? And then rigor. And statements have been said earlier today about students. We don't need to dumb down what we're doing. Everybody deserves rigor, and everybody has that capability. And how are we going to measure? And we have 5 ways that things that we're going to look at. And the first one is social emotional. What are you doing in schools to meet the social emotional needs of your students? We've had social emotional standards for quite some time. It grew out of an emphasis on character education, and then grew and that predates my experience there. The second thing we're talking about is kindergarten readiness. We want to, if we can help have students ready for kindergarten, the biggest gap in education at any one time in a student's life is the first day they go to kindergarten. Because you have kindergarten students that can read at the 2nd or 3rd grade level proficiently, and you have the same kindergarten students in the same room that don't know what blue is, because they haven't had that experience. And there's millions of words that difference in what some students have heard and the others. I've often said that a kindergarten teacher is an automatic candidate for sainthood because I've seen them do miracles every year. So we want to know that. We want to know, so we've started a statewide test to determine what the preparedness so that we can provide resources to those places that need that the most. Individual plans of study. We're going to have an individual plans of study that look at career opportunities for every student in Kansas. And we're looking at high school graduation. Now, I think high school graduation is an overrated thing to look at, and the reason that I say that is because I can change high school graduation by lowering the standards. It's not it's not graduating that's important. It's what they can do when they graduate. So we've added the fifth thing, and that is post-secondary effectiveness. And we feel that we are responsible for students until they get to what would be, if they're in a regular program, a regular academic program, that second year, that sophomore year. Are they still there at the end of their sophomore year? According to the Georgia Policy Institute, we need 71% of our students in Kansas to have something above high school. We're not there yet, and we need to work on that. I'm getting the glare, so I'll shut up.
Well, no, you're going to have to do an interpretive dance. But we do appreciate you, fleshing all that out for us. But I want to loop back around real quick and ask Steve to just go back to your comment about, moving fast and faster, kind of pumping the brakes. How do you get buy-in from, given all the other initiatives we have happening in the states, all the other demands on districts and expectations for leadership? I mean, what do you actually do to ensure that the local education agencies and districts are kind of with you? And when do you know that you need to pump the brakes?
That's a good question, and it gets to some themes that I've been hearing about integrate rather than add, coherence within the system to ensure that this is not something brand new. But this is an area where, not really to my surprise, it was kind of like, well, yeah, duh, like dear state, yeah, like you're finally caught on, right? You're like, we're doing this work, and it comes at and I'll give you a specific example. So we had a fairly significant investment, a little over $13 million a year to provide social workers to schools who needed an additional professional, mental health professional in the field to do the links that we heard earlier from the teacher. And we had to launch a climate survey in order to identify where the limited resources would then be allocated. We got feedback from one of our school districts, oh man, please don't screw up our climate survey. We've been doing this with Castle. We've got a great survey. Don't add another one. Is there a way that we can have this conversation? And so, yeah, sitting down and having a conversation and having the leader, Christy McGill, within my office for the Safe and Respectful Learning Environments, meet with the team to figure out where we can collaborate and where we can give and take a bit on a climate survey to make sure that it can meet the context of the local school district, but also provide the state, sort of like a twofer, if you will, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the buy-in aspect wasn't incredibly difficult. It was more difficult, I think, on our side, within the agency. When you talk about SEED or you look at measures of social and emotional learning, and there's sort of a groundswell of interest to say, well, if this is something we value, then it should be in our accountability system. That's one thing, and then when you ask the very technical folks, where does this go within the accountability system, and the Twitter patience about it's not valid or reliable or it's subject to this or subject to that, there's been a lot of conversations, I would say, there, more so than trying to convince or trying to grow a group of districts who are interested in this work. They're interested, they're doing it, and now our job is to enable it and to help coordinate it more so than to drive it.
Okay, let's go to, let's see, Mona. By the way, she presents, publishes and consults, and is the author of The Heart of Learning and Teaching and Compassion Fatigue Training for Educators. So a little brainiac for reals. And all of your states have actually adopted the standards, but what role do you think they played in the integration of social, emotional, and academic development in our schools? So, and I think in part of your answer should be a little bit about, because not all states have done this, why should states pursue this as part of a policy position?
I can only speak for Washington State's belief. I mean, we really do believe in this state that it is about whole child education. And we have for a long time in education been so focused on performance in whatever way it looks, and accountability in whatever way it looks. And I do think that those things are really important, but what in our state sort of got lost in the shuffle of all of that was a reminder about what kids need that are physical, social, emotional, and basic needs for kids. So our responsibility has been, and our belief system has been, and our new state superintendent's belief is that in order for kids to be academically successful, we also need to provide these social emotional supports for them. We need to give them the skills that they may already have gotten at home and reinforce them in the school setting, or if they weren't lucky enough to get some of these skills at home in terms of social emotional and awareness, then let's provide a context in the school where they can embrace them, learn them, and they can help them succeed. Let me weave this in for you. Maria tasked us with those words that we were supposed to choose for us, and I said mistake, avoiding, and just surviving. That was me as an elementary kid. Yeah, I got perfect grades in school, and you would never know that I grew up in a home that was terrifically and horrifically impacted by trauma and domestic violence and addiction, all right? But I looked great as a kid in school, but I didn't have social awareness. I didn't have self-management skills that were really good, except for survival, which a lot of kids learn, right? I didn't know how to socially engage. So I think about it often from my perspective at the state level. My own self when I was a kid could have benefited from this, even though I did well in school. So then I think about the kids who maybe aren't doing as well, and they're a little bit easier for us to see in the system. What kind of foundation can we put in place? And we have that belief system at the local, at the regional, and at the state level, and that's what's charging us to move forward in this work. Just one more comment. This is work that takes time. And I love the go fast and go faster, but we also get challenged often to slow down so we do it right. And I can't tell you how many times at the state level in our office that people say, why aren't you guys further ahead with this process? And we're like, because we're watching you, we're learning from you, we're gathering data from you collectively as districts across the state and educational service districts, and you're helping teach us what this statewide frame should look like, instead of us dictating it and informing it. So again, back to that whole child model, the fact that there are kids who don't have a lot of skills or may have skills that need to be reinforced to help them succeed. And I think from a policy perspective, implementing these things in a way that isn't forcing the system is working well for us now. Maybe someday it'll be accountable, it'll be a piece of accountability in Washington State, but I have to be quite honest, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I'm glad it isn't right now. Because it's giving us the opportunity to build relationships and have kinds of conversations that we need to have at all levels to do this work right, so it's sustainable in the long run.
Great. And so, Jim, I pulled your name, and I stole the thunder already because I said not only were you administrator, but I think I said you were a principal and a superintendent. I was so excited about us sharing that piece of our resume. But tell us, from your perspective, how does it get started? I mean, who actually leads it? You've got elected officials, you're one of them. You got a lot of other people who are making decisions that sit in a different seat. But how would you recommend or give us the story behind Kansas? How did it start?
Unlike a lot of other states, I don't know whether it's unlike or not. We are a small, populated, rural state. We went out and visited with people. We, as state board members and as our commissioners, committed to visit every school district in the state in the next couple of years. And he's about halfway through that. And those of us on the State Board of Education actually go with him. Every place we go, when we ask, what are your needs, what are the things that concern you, and what are the barriers that we can remove, everybody tells us our students are coming to us with more emotional trauma, adverse childhood experiences than we've ever had before. And so, in our view, dealing with the social and emotional aspect so that students can be healthy, so that students can be able to function, is just simply common sense. And it's not why do you do it, but why would you not do that? Now, let me go back to the credibility part of it. Whenever I talked about that's going to be one of our measures, we are, when we go into a school and look for the accreditation purposes, we are asking them how they are dealing with that. We are not collecting state data. And the reason that we are not collecting state data is because there's so much emphasis in ranking schools. And we don't want, and anything we collect is public, is public. So we don't want that information. We want you to know about the students in your school so that you can do the interventions to address those. We don't want some newspaper in Wichita or Topeka saying, because this school has more emotional issues than this one, that they're better or worse. We reject that, because the purpose is to find out ways to make life better for each individual child.
I'm gonna backtrack a little bit to kind of keep exploring this question. I want to give Steve an opportunity to respond to why do you think states, or why do you think standards are important policy for states to pursue? But Jim made a statement. He said high school graduation rates are overrated. You know, I mean, why? I mean, if not, you know, improving graduation rates or something else, what's behind it from your perspective? And do you agree with that statement?
I don't know. I wholly agree. Probably have to sit down and have a little more conversation about what's behind that.
Good thing we're on a panel.
Yeah. You know, to me, it's and I think the premise is that if you can, you know, lower the standard and increase your rates, well, then of course that's just bad for kids and bad for policy. What we're set on is a track to identify what does post-secondary really mean. Like, what does post-secondary readiness actually mean? What is the emerging economy? Where are the demands placed upon our economy so that our students can be productive and engage in livable wage careers as a benchmark for quality post-secondary experiences? And then use that to establish the requirements or pathways, multiple pathways in high school, that you can then ensure that your graduation rate is reflective of a high-quality experience that is aligned to post-secondary success. So that is work that we've been working on and trying to resurface and engage and pivot, quite frankly, to a more modern view of from CTE all the way through to engaging in industry. I will say that we had a similar experience. I had a similar experience as Jim did in going and asking questions, and the question we asked was, "What does career readiness really mean?" And to a audience, it always came down to being good people, being good coworkers, not biting your coworker, just being a good person, actively engaged. But on the standards question, we in Nevada, our journey is a little bit different on the standards. I think all of us as policymakers or informing policy recognize sort of the economy of standards, right? Uniform, common definitions, common vision, common characteristics. You can build all sorts of systems around that. We decided to do our social emotional standards, if you will, a little bit differently, where we generated competencies, and the competencies will be acted upon by the state board next week. But they're broader. They're very much very guardrail-ish, if you will, rather than sort of commuter lanes within the highway, to ensure that they can meet the context, but that we also are able to capture the economy of common definitions, common language, that will animate the type of collaboration from district to district, from state and districts, so that we all can see a common, have a common lexicon, but then have a common vision for what SEL really looks like. What is it, and then how can we support it as a state collectively? So a little bit different than like our traditional track for our academic content standards. We decided to move them in a different direction. I will just say this: it's not because of some sort of an absence of political will. I don't think that never been entered into the conversation. This was an iterative discussion with our districts.
Okay, we're going to do a quick rapid round, and then and I have one more question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Starting here with you, Mona. You know, we talked about how you got to where you are and how you started and how you built momentum. How do you maintain it? Like, what's your, like, think about that. Like, give a great phrase just for people to be able to reflect on maintaining where you are today and improving that if possible.
In all honesty, I think it's all of us as adults who are doing the work, practicing our own social emotional wellness and development, honestly. I think it takes so much time and energy to sustain this work from a policy framework perspective. Steve, I love what you said, that you're creating a frame, which we are in this state, which is about the guardrails and not like the prescriptive details. But the energy that it takes and the commitment that it takes from a wide group of stakeholders to do that's tremendous. So I think, you know, this, I don't mean to sound flippant or simplistic in this answer, but I really think us knowing what our own social emotional learning skill sets are, where our strengths are in our own skill sets, where our weaknesses are, and then developing and working on those collectively and collaboratively together in partnership is really how we're going to be able to sustain this work over the next couple of years. Doing some of the heavy lift, especially stuff that we're doing right now.
Okay, Steve?
Having the right people in my office and around me to help me and to help us continue this work. They're persistent, thoughtful, engaged, and just, quite frankly, more right than they're ever wrong. Having the social capital within the organization to be our best and to help model for our districts and to learn from our districts about how to do this as well as other work better. And then have the organizational cycles in place, the routines that ensure that it's never off the radar.
Great.
This is going to
You're on.
This is going to sound really simplistic, but it's because we involve so many people in the discussion before we got there. Whenever I go around the state and I talk to people and we are explaining the vision and explaining what we're interested in and explaining the importance of social emotion, and we don't have to explain that because it's so obvious, people just simply say, what took you so long? So there is such enthusiasm and such excitement about doing things differently and looking at the whole child as opposed to what they do on one test on one day, that it's just exciting throughout the state.
Right, and
I want to add one more thing. We need to deliver, too, on the tasks that we've been charged to do by the people we've been charged to do it in our state. At the State Education Agency, we need to deliver. We need to deliver well, so I would add that.
Right, and then, and just real quick, you know, the commissioners are working on a report developing a report from the nation, and it's going to reimagine how we define pre-K through 12 education. What advice would y'all have for them? Mona, and by the way, she's bilingual.
Thanks for always picking me first.
Well, I mean, it's the luck of the draw.
It is the luck of the draw. That's not fair. Commission, thank you for your leadership. Could you please continue to do exactly what you're doing, which is elevating the hard conversations at the highest levels to push us in the direction of policy and practice and the intersection of policy, practice, and research to help move us forward. In the report that you do, I mean, there's a lot of ideas that come to mind, but I just think the leadership, the more commonalities that we can draw across states and uniformly agree upon, the more frames that we can put together that we have agreement upon, that's probably the best advice you could hear from us in Washington State. We thank you for your leadership.
Jim, you got the draw.
I agree. We thank you for your leadership. It is so important to make sure that we stay at the leading edge. There are places, I'm sure, in each state where quality programs are already in existence, and it's so important to identify those places so that we can look at best practices and so we can replicate them.
Of course, last but not least, Steve, what's your advice?
Geez, I've got a lot of ideas here. There's a set of core competencies that every SEA essentially has, whether it's grant making, monitoring and oversight, and there are specific, easy sort of advice that could be given to SEAs, like evidence-based, make sure that the interventions are evidence-based, And as my director reminds me, make it easy to do the right thing. So states should curate a list of evidence-based curriculum, evidence-based providers. If there's grant cycles, then it should be a very easy line that schools and districts can draw and submit. Very easy if they want to go and provide their own. Then there's a rubric and there's examples of how to ensure that the field is open to other evidence-based providers than what you would receive. The only thing I would also add, at the risk of having to do an interpretive dance, is there are a lot of ways to get it wrong from an SEA. A lot of ways to get it wrong. And it may be a good idea to talk about some of the pitfalls and traps. And I know that's not a strength-based SEL competency that I'm modeling, but it's important because SEAs are busy, they can be fragmented, and you can have this activity happening in one area, and I think a lot of harm can come that way. And the whole SEA can't benefit from understanding and appreciating aspects of equity that are involved here because they would use their traditional frame in running a new SEL initiative. So really important, I think, and really thoughtful, and I'm appreciative of being a part of this and being able to help shape it. Thank you.
Great. All right. So does anybody have any questions for our panelist? Yes, Mr. Schreiber.
So we had you guys were hearing the conversation earlier about where the highest point of leverage is in the system. We can't boil the ocean. We have limited resources, yada, yada, yada. But so the question becomes, if this commission could influence one group, one community, one audience, which one would you, based on your experience, which audience would you prioritize for the messages we hope to be able to capture?
You're saying one, right?
Well, you can rank order them, but I
No,
guess
no,
I want you to say number one, just to force the question.
I'm giving you a hard time. I'm really
Yeah.
giving you a hard time. I'm going to say something different that most people wouldn't say, and it's going to echo what was said on our panel before around equity and social, emotional, and academic development. And that would say, that would be elevating the voice of the teachers, and elevating the voice of the students, and elevating the voice of the families in this discussion. And that's different. I understand what I'm saying is really out of the box. I understand that it's really challenging. I understand it's not necessarily a traditional policy way of approaching things. But I do think that there's a really big importance in the commission embracing the research, the policy, the practice, and the intersections of those things collectively with combining voice and the power of the voice. And that from the educator and the student and from the family perspective about why does SEL matter. We know, but they also know.
Okay, and in the interest of time, another question, and then I'll
I just wish I'd had the
Somebody
courage
have
to
a
go
hand?
first, because I would have said the exact same thing.
great, and there was a hand in the back.
So being that you're all on the local or state bodies, what I know from my experience is that often the folks in those positions are then asking the grassroots, the lobbyists, the parents, the other folks with voice, to say things that you all can't say. And at the risk of putting you in that position, who should we be looking at mobilizing and amplifying to be able to have your backs so that you can actually do what you're trying to do?
So I can, parents are critically important, because I think one of the areas of pushback, we heard it earlier, I think is something related to, I'm going to use the wrong term, but dumbing down by focusing on the first 2 weeks of building relationships. Why aren't you hammering away at algebra, our test scores? So there's a certain, for parents and for the community to appreciate, that would be one area. We've been focusing a lot with our industry partners to ensure that they understand and can draw a through line for the SEL competencies and the required employability skills, which we also think helps with the public. Those would just be two areas. I haven't necessarily felt any inhibition in asking folks or having to not be able to say what I wanted to say at the same time, just to put that on the record.
Another question? Yes.
So you guys are a smattering of red state, blue state, how do you talk about this when you might encounter people talking about, oh, this is character development, or this should be done at home? This is not the role of public education. We need our families to be doing this. What resistance have you seen kind of more from the political arena on funding social emotional learning or providing this kind of thing in public schools?
Do you
And
want
how
me
do
to
you
pull a
address it?
stick? Jim, you get to answer.
We're a deep red state. We're a deep red state. I think we front-loaded the issue whenever we went out and asked the people all over our state. And we're in a different position. We went out and we asked, we built our whole program based on what thousands of people across Kansas told us. And we used that. This is what you told us. And yeah, we have some people that think everything should happen at the home. And the fact is, I just bluntly will tell them, I do too. I think as a parent, I had responsibilities. It's not happening. Somebody has to do it, and it's us.
And this will be our last question. We started a little late, but I wanted to be sure y'all got a full experience with the panel. If not, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up with a rap battle. I'm going to start. Steve, you look pretty excited about that.
Super excited.
No, instead we're going to invite Tim Shriver up. But I want to thank our live stream audience for participating. It's my understanding there were some hiccups when we started, so thanks for hanging in there with us. And it's my understanding that our commission co-chair Tim Shriver is going to come and provide some closing remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Karstaffen.
Would you like to describe your elementary psychosocial self?
My TS is twin sharing, so I'm sharing with my twin co-chair here. We're going back to the original schedule since Linda was able to stay with us and letting her do some closing remarks from the floor, if that's okay with you.
As you know, I'm not standing, but sitting. First, I think we just want to thank you, Maria, for this wonderful panel.
It's all them. Y'all are outstanding.
It's all the panelists. It's wonderful to have such different states represented from across the country and hear this sort of same theme, and for really helping us understand how states can lift this up and help us find the right mix of state, local, and other policy strategies. It's a great conclusion to our meeting here in Tacoma. And I want to, on behalf of all of the commissioners, express our heartfelt gratitude to the people of Tacoma, where all of you, wherever you are. Have really welcomed us and shared your vision and the voices. It's been inspiring, it's been illuminating and educative. It will really drive a lot of the ways that we think about these issues. And it's just been a great way to think about all the pieces and how they come together. It's been a whole community, whole child experience. And we applaud your efforts to be sure that all of your students are really healthy, safe, engaged, challenged, and all of your educators are working with support to be able to enable that for them. And then, of course, I want to thank again the staff who just did a spectacular job bringing this together. And all the commissioners who are working on all of our committees so diligently and moving us forward. It will be a great next meeting when we see the fruits of our labors between now and then. And now, to end our proceedings on a high note with some energy, I know you're tired, but you won't be in a minute. We're going to introduce the Lincoln High School Drumline. Where are they? Oh, this would be like New Orleans style. We'll have a little, you know.
Concluding remarks or ones to wrap us up, but they're getting ready in the hallway. They are
All right. They're going to play us out. And we're going to walk over to lunch.
Everybody should head out, walk over to lunch. Thank you so much. We'll have them serenade us.
Check test.